Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're just a few minutes from getting started. I see that a bunch of people are coming in already. As we wait to get started, wait for a few more people to join, I'd love it if you could share where you guys are joining from. If you could just drop in the comments and let me know. Ali, hey, good to see you. Nice to see you back here. Billy from NYC, that's great. Ali, you're saying you can't hear me? Can everyone else hear me? Is this a general issue that I have? It seems like some people can hear me because they're responding to my question. But if you guys could all give me a thumbs up. If, Melissa, awesome, you can hear me. Melissa, good to see you. Guillaume, welcome from Montreal. Thanks for joining us here. We're just going to give a few more minutes for a couple of people to join, and then I'll dive right in. John from Sydney, what time is it over in Sydney? I suspect it's around midnight. So thanks for joining us so late. Yeah, I'm here in New York City, here in Brooklyn, and it's a cloudy day, which is very good because it's been a little too hot. Oh, 2 a.m. Wow, thanks for joining us. That is commitment. All right, Adi, Dubai to London, also calling in from the UK. Great. All right, it is noon, so it's our official time to start. Just in respect for everyone who has joined us on time, I'm going to dive in. We're going to spend about 10 minutes going through some slides, and then we're going to welcome our guests for our conversation, which will be the bulk of our time together. So let me just flip over to the slides, and then we can get started. Great. So, I think a lot of you already know me. I see a lot of familiar names and I would say faces, but names and icons here on my computer. A little bit about me. My name is Giulio Terra. I am the co-founder of Launch Studio. Just 3 quick things for you to know about me. First is that I worked at Kickstarter for a long time, leading their design and technology team. I really get a lot of fulfillment from helping, guiding, coaching people who are launching products into the world. And since my expertise is around crowdfunding, most of that work that I do is around helping people crowdfund their product launches. And lastly, I am addicted to backing projects. I've backed over 2,500 projects, and I'm also addicted to chocolate. So those are just 3 things you should know about me. I wanted to give a special shout out to everyone who's joining here, who's a member of the Launch Studio community. I see several of you here. I see Melissa, I saw Roger, I see Alex is here as well. I'm sure there's other people here who are, Jeremy, I see you're here too. So thank you all for coming here today. Today we're going to talk about how crowdfunding can be used to support a thriving independent design business. And the way that we're going to spend our time together is over the next 90 minutes, I'm going to split up our time where we're going to take the first bit and essentially explore how this, indie small batch business has been structured in order to be able to thrive. So we're really going to kind of dig into the business itself a little bit. And then for the last bit of my conversation with our guests, we're going to talk more specifically around how they tap in to crowdfunding and how crowdfunding has become such a powerful tool that this company has leveraged in order to help them get to the level of success that they've gotten to. Of course, they've done a lot more hard work and have used a lot of other tools beyond crowdfunding, but that has been a core tool for them that has helped them to get to where they are. At the end of our time together today, I hope you're just gonna, have some new insights, some new tools, tactics, strategies that you can apply to your own journey, to your own product launches. So, moving on, the team that we have joining us today is the team from Studio Neat, and I'm really, really thrilled to have Tom Gerhardt and Dan Provost, which are the 2 founders of Studio Neat, joining me here today. One of the big reasons why is because their first product launch, the Glyph, was actually the first time that I became aware of the power of platforms like Kickstarter for people who are launching physical products. And this is what ultimately, a few years later, I actually started working at Kickstarter, working with this community. But what their work was what initially turned me on to this amazing potential that Kickstarter had to help entrepreneurs and designers bring products to life. So before we get started, this is something I do with every one of our events. I'm gonna set up a quick poll here. I'm gonna ask you to let me know, let us know, why are you joining us today? Are you working on a project that you're gonna launch soon? Have you launched a product that you're currently supporting? Is this something that you have a business already and are considering launching something? Or are you just curious? I'm going to spend a minute here just to get a sense for why people are joining us here today. I see that only a handful of you have answers, so I'm just going to give it another few seconds, and then I'm going to share the results with all of you. Okay, I think we've had 70% of the people have answers, so let me just end the poll and share the results. It looks like the vast majority of you are actively preparing to launch a product soon. A few of you have launched products already using crowdfunding. Handful of you are curious, and some of you are in this exploratory phase that are considering launching something in the future. That's great. I think that's a usual makeup of our events, since most of our events focus on really tools and stories and tactics that are going to help you on that journey to launch a product. So moving on, quick overview of our time together. I get 10 minutes. Includes the time that right now where I'm going to share a little intro of why Studio Neat is our guest today. Why we are so excited to have them join us. Then we're going to spend the bulk of our time, 15 minutes or so, in a conversation with Dan and Tom about Studio Neat's journey. I'm sorry if you hear some honking horns. I'm in a studio here in Brooklyn facing the street, so there's often loitering cars and trucks outside. So usually they're not too loud, but if you are hearing some street noise, my apologies for that. And then we are going to save about 20 minutes for audience Q&A. Here are some things to keep in mind to help you get the most value from our time together. So we're going to cover a lot. What I ask of you is to be an active participant. You're going to see that at several points throughout our time together, I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to ask you to fill out a poll, or I'm going to ask you to share something via the comments, and do share. Your sharing actually will help us not only make this event better, but make our future events better, since we'll get to know more about who you are, what you want to get out of these events. So the next thing is stay until the end. One of the main reasons why is because at the end is when you'll have an opportunity to ask your questions. So that's really when you'll get to hear the conversation that we'll have beforehand, but at the end you'll have that chance to have your questions heard. And I do ask, though, rather than wait to drop your questions into the Q&A at the very end, as we go through, if you have questions, you can drop those questions into the Q&A panel already, into the Q&A window as we go along, because I'm also going to be asking people to upvote questions. We're not going to be able to get through all the questions. So the best way for you to get your question answered is to drop them in the Q&A early, so you can get that question upvoted, because again, we are going to just go from the most upvoted question down the line when we decide which questions to answer. I see that some people are dropping in some comments along the way. I will let you know as we go through the conversation, I won't always be paying attention to the comments. So because I'll be focused mostly on the conversation. So just keep that in mind. And if you do want questions, again, just make sure not to drop those in the chat, but to drop in the Q&A, because we won't be looking at the chat when we are asking questions at the end of the session. So now, just like before we go any further, I wanted to hear from you. What are you hoping to learn from our time together today? And I'm not dropping a poll here. What I want to do is just, if you could just drop in the comments, let me know, like what are you hoping to learn from the conversation here and from the opportunity to ask questions. I'm gonna stop here for a second, so don't be shy. Let us know what's on your mind here. Otherwise, we're just gonna have an uncomfortable 30 seconds of silence. Cool. I see Ali, you want to learn everything. Okay, that's a tall order. I think we'll try to give you as much of everything as possible, but I think that's good. I think that just shows that you're just really interested in kind of hearing about Studio Neat's journey. We want to have design, product, and launch experience. So awesome. Femi, you want to really understand how they go about their launches and so forth. Hey, Caitlin, good to see you. Hope everything's well in Seattle. awesome. You're looking to learning some multi crowdfunding strategies and what it's like inside a design studio. That's great. Validate your Roger. Thanks for sharing. You're saying you want to validate your business model and learn from other business models. Alex, anything to make my bike idea into a business? Yes, that's great. I know you've been working really hard on bringing the tech bike to life. Jeremy, I'm glad you're here. I know that I think your path, in many ways, the path that you're trying to blaze is very much in line with the path that the Tom and Dan have blazed with Studio Neat. Billy, get a little more insight into the crowdfunding launch process. That's great. Thank you all so much. I know I didn't read everybody's response, but again, I really appreciate you sharing a little bit about what you're hoping to learn here today. So, I love Studio Neat. I mean, that's where I'll start. That's the main reason why I invited them to join is that I really, I'm a big fan of their work. I'm a big fan of the way they approach their work. And so, here's a few reasons why, beyond loving Studio Neat, I think they're such a great, representative of what's possible in this kind of modern design, in the indie design world. So, Studio Neat, they've built a really thriving independent design studio. And, they started 2010 launching one product on Kickstarter, and they've gone on to build, a really healthy portfolio of simple, thoughtfully designed, well-crafted products. They've been able to do this while running, a solidly profitable business. And they've also been able to do this in a way that they continue to be able to carve out time to work on new products. And finally, it's really impressive, but their team is still just a team of two. It's still just the two co-founders that are, that make up Studio Neat. As I mentioned, Studio Neat was born on Kickstarter. They launched their first product, the Glyph, in 2010. And the Glyph was, an iPhone 4 tripod mount and stand. And they set out to raise $10,000. They raised $137,000. And what they did, though, is they really showed what was possible. I mean, you did have people before them that had launched products on Kickstarter, but they hadn't raised nowhere near what they raised. And so I think they kind of, I look at it as a watershed event where, all of a sudden, designers and entrepreneurs really could see, oh my God, like you can make amazing things through this platform called Kickstarter, which previously had been used primarily by creators who are making films or making albums and things of that nature. They've also have built a business that is powered by Kickstarter. It's definitely, they've grown way beyond Kickstarter, but they've continued to launch products on Kickstarter. They've launched 10 successful products on Kickstarter to date, and they've also had one campaign that didn't succeed. And I'm going to actually ask them to talk a little bit about that, because it's amazing to hear how, even having a campaign that didn't succeed, that also helped them move forward in their path as Studio Neat. All told, they've raised, around $1.5 million across all their projects on Kickstarter, which is pretty amazing. And, I am going to touch on our conversation. Why does Tom and Dan continue to come back to Kickstarter to launch new products? And when do they launch products on their own, since they also do launch products through other means? And the final reason why I think Studio Neat is such a great team to have here with us today is that they've had such a generous spirit throughout their entire journey. And what I mean by that is, since their early days, they've always been really willing to share about their experience launching products and share, like really nuts and bolts detail about how they go about launching products. I mean, they've published a book. It's called It Will Be Exhilarating. It was published in 2015, and it just talks about their path creating an indie design studio. And this is actually, this video that's playing here is a loop of the promo video for that book. They do a monthly podcast where they kind of dive into the details of running the business that they run and creating new products and putting them out in the world. They have this really awesome weekly newsletter called the Gazette, the Studio Neat Gazette, where they also share about things that they're passionate about, things that they're interested in, and about, again, their Studio Neat journey. And they also have an amazing blog. I mean, this blog is no longer maintained by them. They're no longer adding to it, but there's still some really amazing gems that you can find in the blog. And all this stuff you can find on studioneat.com. So if you're wondering where can you look at that stuff. So enough about me talking. Let us welcome Tom and Dan here. I'm just gonna, give me 1 second. I just gotta bring them in. So give me 1 second. And Tom and Dan, I think when you join, you're gonna be muted. So just, you'll have to just unmute yourselves when you get in here.
Whoa.
Awesome.
I've been promoted to a panelist.
Yes, congratulations. Well, guys, it's so great to have you here. Let me just give you both a chance to introduce yourselves. Maybe just share a little bit about yourselves and a little bit about Studio Neat. I know I've talked a little bit about you guys, but I'd love to hear in your own words.
Cool. So I'm Tom, and here in my home office, and there's like a bunch of kids rolling around. So if you hear banging and screaming, that's what that is. But I'm here in Austin, and so is Dan. And I mean, you did a really good job, Julio, of introducing Studio Neat. I mean, that's basically it. We're just like two designers trying to, make stuff that's cool, basically. And we've been at it for 11 years, and so we've kind of been around everything, but I mean, that's basically it. I mean, I think as we talk, we can talk about kind of any histories, any more in-depth history stuff, but I mean, that's basically it. I have like 3 young kids, live in Austin. I'm 37. That's about it.
Yeah, no, I'm Dan. That was a super good recap. I don't really have much to add. Maybe just like in terms of Tom and my relationship, like we went to college together at Texas A&M undergrad, and that's where we became friends. We both decided to go to grad school, and that happened to be like both in New York, different schools, but both in New York City. So we got to take the U-Haul road trip to New York. And it was after grad school, we were both working, full-time as designers. And then that we were living in the same apartment, just 4 floors apart from each other. And that's when we kind of had the idea for the glyph. And I think honestly, like the super close proximity was really easy to like, hey, just pop down and let's like brainstorm about this thing. And so it started off as a side project, as like a side hustle. We really had no intention of quitting our jobs or starting a full-time thing. It just kind of happened. And so maybe we can get into that like later in terms of like your intentions or what you're actually like going for. But yeah, like Tom said, we've been doing it for 11 years now and no intention of stopping.
And that's amazing. I think you've already started actually going into the first thing that I want to talk about, which is the founding story, like how the glyph came to be. I think and you're kind of getting into a little bit about that right now in terms of that you were working. Can you just share a little bit more, like what inspired for you to create the glyph? What was that process like? Like why did you take that leap with that first product?
Well, it's funny, we have a screenshot of like Dan texting me like, hey, I have like an idea for something that like might make some money or something, like a very simple, funny screenshot. And like Dan mentioned, we were both just like working full-time as designers in New York. And when we first like approached it, it was very much like we would be doing projects in grad school. Like, let's just like build this thing that could be cool. And that was like literally all it was. And really it got born out of a real need, like an honest need that Dan had of like, I have this iPhone 4, it's the best camera I've ever had, but like in taking video or pictures, it's like all blurry. So we want to be able to put it on a tripod. And so it was just that simple thing of like, we want to be able to stick this thing on a tripod. Let's solve the problem like you would. And we just like sketched and we did some 3D models and got some 3D prints like way back in the day before you could have from Shapeways, but it was way back in the day. Got some 3D prints. And then we were kind of stuck. We're like, hey, we have this cool thing. It like works. It's 3D prints, but like now what? Like, wouldn't it be cool if we could like, send it to other people? And I had heard about Kickstarter in grad school, but I was like, that's too good to be true. There's no way there's going to be like strangers that give you money for free on the internet. Like, what are you talking about? But Dan had backed the Obama book, right? Designing Obama
Designing
book, right?
Obama, yeah.
And kind of had seen like Kickstarter like work as like a full thing. And so we just got to thinking like, okay, maybe this could work for like a physical product. And so we just kind of put together a pretty naive video and put it up, it just kind of took off, and we were kind of surprised, and then we kind of basically just got forced into starting a business because we weren't we didn't have that intention. It was mostly just like, let's make this cool thing, period.
Yeah, at the time Kickstarter was so new that we had a hard time finding a precedent on Kickstarter, so we could be like, oh, we can like kind of model our project after this. And we could basically look at every project that had been on the site after that date because it was so few. And there were like 2 examples that were close enough to, it's like, okay, this seems to work for this thing. So I think Kickstarter would be the right thing to use for the glyph. One of the projects was your buddy Creighton, like his pinch little thing. It was like, okay, this is like a designer with taste, and this is like an industrial designed object. But the difference was that was a little more like bespoke feeling. Like it didn't feel like there was like this industrial process behind it that needed this like capital upfront. But the other reference was someone wanted to injection mold like a plastic mustache that you would clip onto like a 2-liter bottle of soda. So whenever you're drinking, like it would look like you have a mustache. It's like the stupidest thing. But it was like, it was literally the only example of someone doing injection molding on Kickstarter. It was like, okay, well, I guess this works because these people did it. So that's just like, it's fun to think back of like how new of an idea like Kickstarter was, that it was like hard to find precedent.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because that was really a different world. I mean, to your point, I recommend everybody here go and look at the project page of that original glyph. It was a moment where it was just a text-based page other than the video. Like, it's not like nowadays where when you launch a product, you have this really kind of well thought out project page with these beautiful product images, or at least thoughtful product images. It was literally, I mean, I think you guys did a really good job on the video. It was but that was the whole selling was through the video. Like the project page was just a simple text. Definitely simpler days, simpler and more complex though, because you guys, simpler in the sense you could have a simple project page, but you guys were really kind of lazy and you frail. So it was a much more unproven.
Well, I will say though, in a lot of ways, it's like easier in some ways because we got so much attention just for the fact of being on Kickstarter. It was like a news story. We would get like interviewed by like Gizmodo or something just because it was Kickstarter, right? And so I think obviously that has changed in the opposite direction in some ways. But so I think it was harder because like the infrastructure for like making and fulfilling products it was very nascent, but we also just got a lot of attention just for like doing what we're doing, and we're obviously still like living off that in some ways. And so I think the game has definitely changed when you're starting out, I think, for sure. But yeah, it was wild. I mean, we didn't believe it. I mean, so like Dan mentioned, we had full-time jobs. We had this crazy success with the Kickstarter, but it was a full like 4 or 5 months later before we decided to like quit our jobs. Like, we just could not believe that this is like real, because we thought it was a fluke basically, because we launched a second Kickstarter about like 5 or 6 months later for the Cosmonaut, which is like this capacitive stylus, and that was successful. And then we're like, okay, like this is real, like we could do this. And so that's when we quit our jobs and like went for it. So it took some convincing, because I just think it was just mind-blowing, like that this is a thing that's possible. And I still don't quite believe it in some ways.
And how did you guys, when you decided, at that point you're like, okay, we're gonna it went from like being these kind of side hustle cool little things that you guys wanted in your lives to like, okay, this is we're gonna go for this, we're gonna focus on this entity that we're creating, Studio Neat. like, how did you guys go in? How did you guys take that step? Like, was it very much like just kind of leap of faith? Did you guys try to be very methodical about taking that step?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were pretty careful. And when the glyph happened, when our first Kickstarter project, our respective companies were super cool, and they actually let us, but we requested to have like 1 day off a week to dedicate to Studio Neat, and they let us do that, which was amazing. So that was like we were like very hesitant to jump in. We were like trying to take these little half steps. It's like, oh, maybe we can like manage both. But it was really the launching of that second Kickstarter and the fact that it was also a success in a very similar way just made us think, okay, we have something here. Like, this wasn't a fluke. This is like a repeatable process that we can, keep doing. And I think the Cosmonaut was a more complex thing as compared to the glyph. So we were also feeling the need to, be able to dedicate full-time effort to that rather than just 1 day a week and the weekends. So yeah, we held off as long as we could, but it became clear at a certain point that we needed to go all in.
And just kind of seeing how you guys have ultimately kind of grown the business, in a sense, like, it's just the two of you still, you guys, have been able to build this portfolio of products while still having time to focus on creating new products and things like that. Was that something that you guys set out like, hey, this is how we want to evolve this thing, or has it been mostly pragmatic decisions that have led you guys to we will dive in a little bit more to where you are currently and how your processes are, but like, has it been like a pragmatic evolution, or was it like this very intentional set of choices that you guys early on were like, we want to keep this small, we want to make sure we can always focus on the creative side of the business of making new things?
Yeah, it's been both. It's been organic, but also very intentional. So we just have said no a lot. So we, from the get-go, really early on, I think we could have hit a trajectory where we started hiring people and kind of grown it in that way, like in maybe a more traditional way where you hire some people, then you can do more marketing, you can do more products, and it's kind of this thing that, builds in that way. But I think we recognized really early on that, we started this thing as designers, and that's really the thing we want to be doing. And we heard from a lot of people, like, it's easy to get on this kind of treadmill where you hire your first person, and then to support that person, you need more revenue. So you need to do certain things, and then you need more people to get that revenue. And it becomes a treadmill where it's hard to get off this kind of like hiring thing. And we didn't want to turn into like managers, basically. And so that was, I think, our like initial kind of feeling on it. And over the years, we've always kind of second guessed that and been like, oh, should we hire this, or should we grow in this way? But I think now the thing that we recognize that I don't think we really understood in the beginning was we're really lean. Like, we don't have an office. We both have home offices. And having like a small amount of overhead and being really lean allows us to be incredibly flexible. And so we can just decide on a whim, like, we're going to do this product, or we're going to do this, because we can make these kind of risky jumps into different products because we don't have this huge infrastructure to support behind us. As we know other company creative people that started out like us and they grew to like a larger thing where either they have manufacturing in-house or just a larger team. And it's a much bigger ship to move, like steer, like they have more control in some ways, like locally, and they can do more stuff, like more marketing, more, maybe in-house manufacturing, which can be better for turnaround times and stuff. But they have a lot of overhead they have to take care of. And so it's stressful, and it's just like slower moving. And so we really optimize for simplicity and control. And like how we spend our time. And so, we probably definitely leave opportunities on the table and money on the table. But at the end of the day, we're just really interested in that control and being able to make what we want. And so we've been very intentional about saying no to those kind of moves. But it's also felt organic to us. So it hasn't been a huge struggle. But I think there is internally some struggle, because it seems like the world wants to push us towards that more traditional like business not model, but like kind of business, I guess, like organization. And it seems like everything's built for that. Like we're a little bit smaller than we should be in some ways. And so that is like hard. It's hard to resist that. But at least for now, I don't see it changing, but it might. Like we like, it's like all the time, every like year or 6 months, we're like, maybe we should hire someone and start, always kind of there.
And just a little, one of the things, like you talk about how you say no to a lot of things and how you guys, it's really important to you to be able to pivot, and like, if you want to make something, you want to be able to just make that leap. Can you share a little bit about your design process? Like, how do you guys go about, are you guys always exploring a bunch of little things and then some of them grow into something bigger? Or is it more like, do you guys have inspirations around something and you're like, oh my God, this is it, like, let's just focus on this next? Like, how does that trickle?
Yeah, it's very kind of casual and organic, and at times capricious and haphazard. But I mean, that's like another thing we've always said is like, we started with like something in the kind of iPhone, Apple camera world. And then we kind of immediately went to like, stayed in the Apple world, but it was like nothing camera related. And then we kind of jumped to like an app, and then all of a sudden like cocktail stuff, and then like stationary stuff. So I suppose one way to do it is to stay kind of in a silo where it's like, okay, we're like a camera gear company now or whatever at the beginning, but our guiding kind of product design philosophy has always been just kind of selfishly like making the things that we want, right? So the thing we've always said is kind of like listening to the little like frictions in our lives, and it's like, oh, here's a little problem here that we think we can solve with a product that we have the capability to make. And so it's like shifted over time. So like a good example is like the stationary stuff, where we now have some like stationary products where I might not personally use myself, but I know there's like an audience for and like a desire for from our customers. And so we're like happy to make those things and provide those, even if they're not like scratching a specific itch that I have. But yeah, it's like almost everything is just initiated with a text message between Tom and I, like, hey, what do you think of this? And then if we think there's something there, then we'll explore it. Sometimes like we have an idea right now that's kind of on the back burner while we work on this other thing. But yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add, Tom, but it's pretty.
Well, yeah, I would say like, we have lots of ideas, I think, and we will kick them around with each other. But I think the thing that transforms it into like just an idea to something that we'll start working on in earnest is basically just some like key product insight that makes it click for us. So, even like, for instance, we've made some pins, right? We made like a fancy click pin, and it's like, okay, there's a billion pins out there. Like, I think our previous selves, like in the first half of Studio Needs history, we wouldn't have made a pin or even thought about making a pin because it didn't seem like novel enough or anything. But I think we have like slowly gotten used to the idea of just like, kind of doing our own version of something. But we don't want to just like make a pin just to have a pin. And so we wouldn't make it unless it had some like kind of key piece that was almost like the subtitle for the product, or the thing that kind of like describes it or like sells it in like one word, basically. And so for the Mark One, which is like the first pin we did, it's just like a really durable click pin with a really awesome feeling click. And that's just like what the product is, period. And if we can't arrive at like that simple distillation of what it is, we usually won't work on it. Like we'll think about it, but we won't start doing like industrial design type activities and like, 3D modeling it and really kind of iterating on it. So that's kind of what we're always hunting for, I think, with an idea. Like we might have lots of little ideas, but it doesn't kind of crystallize until we have that kind of product insight. But like for another instance would be, we have this notebook called the Pano book. And so we had made a pen and we were like, oh, I'm wondering if we should just think about a notebook. And then Dan had this idea of like, well, I want a notebook that actually goes in between me and my keyboard on my desk. And that was kind of the main like design brief that was like, oh yeah, no, that's a real good idea. That's a real good thing. And then from there, it kind of evolved. And so we hunt around, until we kind of get one of those. And that's
Yeah,
usually,
because we don't have a marketing team, because we are the marketing team, we basically, the
Yeah.
marketing and product design are interconnected and they're never separated. Like for the entire product design journey, we're thinking, what is the story of this product? And if we can't tell that story, then we don't have a product. And so
Yeah.
those two things are always working together
Yeah.
throughout the entire design process. And that's not, and again, perhaps that's another argument for keeping things small, is we can kind of have those thoughts simultaneously because there's no one else to be having the thoughts. We're the only ones that can have those. So
But
it ends up working well.
this is great actually, because this is one of the things that I really wanted to dive into a little bit, which is this kind of the way that your development process links to your marketing process, or to the process of getting this thing out in the world, how those two things are linked. So I'd love to explore a little bit more around this area. I mean, I think there's this notion that you just Tom, you just brought up around this key insight that you guys are looking for, both as a kind of a validation, like that this product is worth continuing to explore. But then how does that, so that maybe gives you the checkbox, okay, we're going to continue working this, it's interesting enough. How does the marketing work stream happen then? Do you guys already start thinking at that point about the story you're going to tell around that product?
Yeah.
Like how
It's
does
like, it's basically the way we just develop products is, it's like everything, it's not horizontal, but it's like everything at once. We even think about pricing from the immediate thing. Like we view pricing, marketing, name, and product design as all literally the same thing. And so like, as we develop, let's say like a pen or a notebook, when we first think about it, it's like, okay, well, it's like a notebook on your desk. We have an idea about what we think it should cost, because that's like part of the product story. It's very different. It's like, well, this is $1,000 notebook for your desk, or it's like a $1 notebook. Those are extraordinarily different things. And so those things are like in the kind of soup the entire time. And so as we're developing the product, we're also thinking about what those decisions will do to affect price. Do we need to make different decisions to make it cheaper or like more expensive or nicer? And so we're always thinking about all those things at the same time. And sometimes they evolve. Like sometimes we decide like, oh, we thought we wanted it to be this pen that was all about a click, but really we found out that it should be about this. Like it definitely shifts, or like the time of target price or whatever can change, but it's always all there. And so when it comes to like marketing at the end, that work's already been done. It's like, sometimes we might have to decide like, what is the exact wording for a tagline or for like a subtitle for the product, but like the name has been cemented from the beginning. Like we basically can't stand it if the product doesn't have a name. And so like those, it's like it, and I think the nice thing about it is the marketing comes off as like very either self-evident or authentic, because it's imbued in what the product is. Like, hopefully if we've done our job right, like the product design reflects the marketing, which reflects what it's used for and everything. And that's because we've been thinking about it all the entire time. And so like when we launch a Kickstarter, when we decide how much like either a goal is or like what the price of the product is, we usually won't even decide until, I don't know, like the day before we push the launch button. But it's always within like $5. We're like, I don't know. We were thinking, should it be 65 or 60? I don't know. I guess 65, because we can be confident in that decision because we've been thinking about it for 6 months, just not super exactly, but we know roughly what it should be, just because we've known that from the beginning of the product, because that's like what it is. And so, yeah. And I think Dan, like mentioning that, I think we kind of underestimate how valuable being a small team is in that regard, because like Dan said, we know that we have to make all those decisions. And so we can't like shove them to the side. Like it's just like always been part of the conversation. Like everything has always been part of the conversation. And so I think that's really valuable. And it might be something that we just kind of like don't think about because it's always been that way for us. Because I imagine, so Dan makes all the product videos, and I'm guessing, Dan, tell me if I'm right, but I'm pretty sure that you sometimes have images of what should be in a product video, like from like day 1 or 2 of like a product. Is that generally right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's, I think that kind of thing is what, I mean, I think we have like a pretty like simple and authentic like marketing style. And I think it's just because of that, basically.
And just, this I think kind of goes back a little bit to the process stuff. I don't remember if it was Dan or Tom, which one of you mentioned that about how the panel book, I think it was Dan who mentioned the panel book, or when you guys were starting to do stationery, that was something that you don't personally use, but it was something that your customers had wanted. And so you guys were happy to take that on. When it is a product like that, where, because I get that you mentioned earlier how so many of your products are things that you're like, it's a friction that you're feeling in your own life, and you're like, okay, and then it's, you have yourself as this ruler that you can measure against how well you're doing at fixing. When it is when you are doing something more for your audience, does that change how you approach the design process or the marketing of it, or is it just like, are you so, like, I know you guys have a very strong relationship with your audience too, so is that already because of that relationship, it allows you to like some kind of access into some of those insights?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty much the same, because at the end of the day, it's kind of like our taste and design sense that's kind of guiding the choices anyways. So even if it's like a type of pen or something that we wouldn't necessarily use all the time, we still know what it should be in terms of like getting the design details right and making sure it feels good and making sure it's easy to change the refill or whatever it may be. And so yeah, I would say generally there's not much of a difference. Sometimes where if we're wading into territory that like we're a little bit familiar with, then we'll, message friends or people that we know that are like a little bit more experts in that territory, or perhaps if we're trying to reach an audience that might be a little bit outside of our core audience, then it might be like, we're thinking of doing this. Like, how do you think that will play with this audience? Or are there any like preferences or biases that we like might not be aware of? Like, those are good things to ask, but at the end of the day, it's, it's like our design sense and taste that's kind of guiding.
Yeah, but also I think we're very intentional about, we wouldn't design like a seat for a helicopter, right? Because none of us, we can't even imagine what the constraints of that problem are.
Yeah.
So even though it might be like, oh, I'm Dan and I don't use this exact notebook, it's close enough to where he can like imagine what that would be like to do it. So we always are really close. And like, if it is something where it's like, when we started making a pin, we have like some friends that are like way into pins, and we asked them about it, but it was mostly questions about getting like a view of the context, right?
Got it.
What are good pins? What are not good pins? Like, that kind of thing. We still make our own design decisions, like Dan was saying, but sometimes it's awesome to have like just a broader view of like, oh, like we don't want to miss this awesome pin that exists that we want to check out or whatever. So I don't think we wouldn't make something like for a client. We don't have clients, but if we had a client that was like really, we're not used to doing like any market research or any like design studies or anything like that, and we feel like fish out of water. So it's always something that we can imagine that's pretty close, even if it's not like in our lap,
That's great. And I think
I was just going to say, it's again, one of the kind of byproducts of just being a two-person company, where it's like, if you hired Frog Design or someone to make a helicopter seat, then they have a process in place for all the appropriate like research that would need to be done, so they feel educated enough to design that product. And so we just like circumvent that by only designing things that we can actually, speak to or are close enough to things we're interested in.
Awesome. And so, the last question I have for you, I think more general Studio Neat stuff, which is a big one though, is exploring a little bit about like how Studio Neat has thrived beyond just the design and marketing thing, like operationally. I mean, you guys are making tons of products, you guys are shipping tons of product, and you're a two-person team. So what are the kind of, just getting a glimpse at how you've set yourself up to be able to do that? What are things that you're keeping in house? What are things that you're outsourcing? Like, what are some maybe unexpected decisions that you have to make, or you think that somebody that might want to kind of follow the same path, like some things that you're like, yeah, these are some things that we had to decide that have really helped us achieve what we've achieved?
Yeah, for sure. So we outsource a lot. So we have a e-commerce store built on Shopify. And then we have a third-party fulfillment company that we use called Shipwire, and they have a warehouse. It's all ships. It's like it's horrible. Anyways, we have a warehouse in California and then one in the UK. And so when an order comes in from our e-commerce store, it goes directly to the third-party fulfillment, and they ship it out. And about like 40%-ish of our customers are actually like international. And so having a European warehouse is a huge pain, especially now after Brexit, but it's a huge pain. But for us, it's worth it for our particular reason. I don't think it's worth it for a lot of people. But anyways, so that's like how that side of the thing works. It used to be that all the stuff we had made was in the US, and the manufacturers that made the products would also assemble them and package them and then ship them directly to the warehouse. But now it is becoming more and more common that we are, for like half our products, we are actually doing the assembly. So like we will, get the parts in directly to us and do the assembly ourselves and then send them to the warehouse, which is something we would like to get away from. It's not awesome, but it's really difficult to find someone that we could outsource that to, because we have like very specific requirements about like how things need to be packaged and assembled and stuff. And we're not big enough to where we could have like this relationship with this like contract assembly company, and we're like always sending them product and the quality control is really good because it's like in a constant process. We're just not that big. We don't have the volume. And so I don't think it's really feasible for us to like find like a third party like assembling thing if it's not like one company is making the full product and then just sending it out. And that happens some, like for notebooks and stuff, that totally happens. But for like pins or like little iPhone charging docks, we're having parts come from everywhere. And so to send them to one place to have it assembled is difficult. But that's like one of our main pain points is that, because it takes a lot of time. And it's something that I think we eventually, if we had space somewhere and then like a employee to do that assembly, that is kind of, I think, where we would maybe go eventually. But that's roughly how it works. But we assemble in big batches and then ship them off to the warehouse, and they just sit there. So that's in and general.
That makes for that, and that makes for good Instagram fodder too.
Well, that is like what our entire Instagram is filled with, because we also have this like somewhat policy where we don't want to talk about products that we haven't released yet that are in process. And we have some internal debate about that, but and so when we don't have a lot to show on like social media in terms of like it's only products that have already been released. So in some ways that's not as fun, but
but that's something also we've been talking about between Tom and I, is like making a point to surface these things to our customers, because the fact that we are actually assembling a lot of this stuff ourselves and doing the QA ourselves, there's a real like personal touch to it that if we don't tell anybody about that, nobody will know. And that to me is kind of like an advantage, or something that's unique, at least with Studio Neat as compared to some of these other companies. And it makes us like a little bit special that we do have that. Literally is just two dudes, and we are like kind of pretty much doing everything. And so I think it's good to like have ways to, in a not annoying way, like let people know that it's like, here's kind of the behind the scenes of how this is all going down.
Yeah, like things have flipped. I remember being in high school and like making fake websites for like a fake design company to be like, hey, look how real this is, because it's like a company name or whatever. And I think now it seems like on crowdfunding in particular, and like Instagram ad, like direct to consumer product companies, is like they're always repping that they're this like authentic small batch company. But in reality, I think a lot of them are like VC backed, like white label Chinese manufactured stuff that's like not authentic at all. And so well, if we had this kind of realization, like, oh, we look just like those direct to consumer brands if you were to look at our like product page or our Instagram account or something. But we're actually doing this completely different thing, and it's like foolish to not tell that story, because even if it's not cool, at least it's different, and we're not just like in this tidal wave of like DTC brands. So I think that's something that we are like trying to figure out how to show in an interesting way. And I mean, we've always done that. We've always talked about like Studio Neat, it's Tom and Dan, like that's like on our website masthead. That's like how it is. We've always had that. But I think it's becoming more and more important for small companies to really do the thing that only they can do, right? Like we have two things we can do that these bigger companies can't. One, we can make niche products that they won't touch because there's not big enough scale. So we can make things for like, you know, Apple nerds or like pin nerds or like whatever that are like pretty specific, and it's a small scale, but it works for us. Great. That's one of our superpowers. And the other one is that we can like be authentic and our like marketing and like storytelling, because it like very much is, and we don't have this like marketing department that has to like then apply a story to things. And so I think we're really going to have to like into the future even lean into that stuff more and more, because I think it's going to become more prevalent that brands are going to get smaller and smaller seeming, and products are going to get more and more niche and specific because of the way manufacturing will go. And so I think as like a small independent creator or a small team, I think finding ways to kind of show that off is like a good way to differentiate. And I think it's probably somewhat critical.
Awesome. And so I want to shift gear a little bit now to start exploring, you know, your use of crowdfunding as a path to launch products. And I think the way that I wanted to start is just, you know, why does Studio Neat continue to use Kickstarter to launch products? Like what are the main kind of reasons that the main benefits that you see from taking? I know you don't launch all your products there, and I want to explore a little bit how you decide which ones to launch. But let's first just understand like what are the benefits that you see already as an established, you know, company, albeit a small batch one to launch products.
Yeah, there are many. I mean, I feel we had this codified into like a few bullet points I'm trying to recall, but it's like oftentimes it's like we literally need the capital to launch this product. Like the Mark I, for example, was like tens of thousands of dollars of like upfront cost needed to place an order that's like large enough to be reasonable to like make that product go forward. So oftentimes it's just straight up like we would not be able to, we don't have like the cash flow to like fund this without something like Kickstarter. So of course you could do something else. Like we have kind of enough of an audience and like a mailing list and stuff. Now it's like, maybe we could do one of those like crowdfunding plugins for Shopify or something and just do that on our site or whatever. That's something we've certainly considered and may do for something in the future, but Kickstarter has still, even though, as Tom mentioned before, like the kind of press benefit of like, ooh, it's a Kickstarter project, let's blog about it, like that has gone away. There still is a benefit to being on Kickstarter, just in terms of the network of, you know, people visiting the site or someone that you follow backs it and you get like a notification. Like all of that stuff is not nothing. Like that's kind of makes a non-trivial difference in the funds you're able to raise. And then just like there's the idea validation aspect too, right? Where it's like, if we're unsure if this thing has legs or enough, rather than investing all of that of our own capital up front, we can see if people actually want this or not. So Tom, I don't know if I'm forgetting one of the...
I think that's the main ones. Besides, I would also say that like for us, I think there is, even though we could do like a crowdfunding like plugin or something on our own website and it would like work, I think there's a kind of, from a story perspective, there is a big difference between saying we're like launching a Kickstarter and just like having a pre-order on our website. Like those are different. And we've actually kind of we're considering soon doing a middle ground where we don't launch a Kickstarter, but we just do a pre-order on our website. And the reason, like, why the way we're thinking about that decision is it's kind of for like an updated version of a product we already do. And it doesn't seem like as big necessarily as like a Kickstarter launch in terms of like a new product and the story to tell and stuff. But we also kind of need some capital. And so we're thinking of doing just a straight up pre-order. But the only way that kind of we're comfortable with that is if it's a pretty quick turnaround from when we like do the pre-order to when we can deliver the product. And I think the thing that Kickstarter provides us is this context where it can take a year for a product to like actually get to the person's hands, but there's this like context, understanding, and like mechanism for being able to like tell that story. Like currently we're like making this Mark II, which is this pin that we launched like nearly a year ago. And we've had some production problems, and we've been able to tell that story through Kickstarter and that context. And it makes it like way, like it's like less stressful for us in some ways, because we know at least we're being able to tell people. And then also it's just like, yeah, it fits into this kind of like story that people have in their heads, I think, that back Kickstarters of like, this is a journey, like this is not for sure, like it's a whole thing. And so being able to have that context is like awesome. Oh, I remember the last point, Dan. And the last point is Kickstarter is awesome motivation, or just crowdfunding is like amazing motivation, because it's real easy when you get to the point in a product where you've solved all the fun problems and it's like, you're in, I think like Elon Musk coined the term like production hell or whatever. And he's like, exactly right. Like you go through this design process of like designing the fun stuff about a product. And then you go through an entire other design process during the manufacturing process, which I don't think anyone talks about or even expects. And that is often so brutal that if you know that you kind of have like some people that are excited about this thing and you're making it for them, it's not a question whether you're going to finish it or like if you need to do it. There's like no question. And so it's really good motivation for kind of tightening all the screws and getting it just right, because you have these people that are like there. And so I think that is like a huge deal. And if I was starting out as like because I know like when I came out of grad school and we were both working designers, I was trying to make products. Like I was trying to make like they're more arty, but like more like art object projects. And I would always do the same thing. I didn't have a design partner, and I would like design all the fun stuff. And then when it came to the like hard production stuff, it would just like stop basically. And if I had Kickstarter available to me then, like I would just like launch it on there and get like 10 backers, and that would totally change my relationship to that product and get me over the finish line. So when we talk to people about like starting out, like I think starting out with a really small Kickstarter project, just for the straight up motivation, it's like amazing. It's worth it.
That's awesome. No, that's super helpful. And I'm actually going to drop a poll to the attendees about just to get a sense of like, what are the main benefits that they hope from launching a product Kickstarter. I think there's all the things that you guys mentioned here and a few other ones, but let's carry on with the conversation. I think I'll pull that up later, but if everyone here take a look at that and let us know, what are you hoping to get from launching a product? So the next thing that I want to talk to you both about around this area is, you mentioned a little bit how, there's one product that you're now considering doing the pre-order, that it's an update on an existing product. So but there are other products that you guys have launched that were brand new products that you just launched on your own website. So what is that process that you go through in terms of deciding like what gets launched on a platform like Kickstarter and what do you launch just on your own site?
Yeah, it's kind of a gut instinct thing, but I think generally we like to save the like big projects, whatever that means for Kickstarter. Like we like to make a big kind of splash on Kickstarter, or for it to be like, hey, this is like a brand new thing that we're making, and we think you should back it. So like a good example of when we don't do that is like PanoBook was a it was our first notebook, and it was kind of like a stake in the ground, like, hey, we make notebooks now. And so that felt like appropriate for a Kickstarter project. And it was a pretty unique idea. Like they this idea of like a panoramic notebook that's specifically designed for your desk. We hadn't really seen that. So it was like a new product category for us, and also like a seemingly original idea. But in contrast, the tote book, which is our second stationary product, is a really nice product. We really like it. It has nice materials, but it kind of lacks the originality of the Pana book. Like at the end of the day, it's just like a roughly A5 sized, like flexible notebook. So it has definitely like unique things about it, but it's not quite as interesting, I guess. And so we decided, this one we can just like release on our own. And so I feel like generally that is the kind of like barometer, is like, is this a new product category? And is this like unique, or is the story like really self-evident and really easy to tell? Otherwise, we'll try to find a way to just release it straight to our site.
Well, and if we don't need a bunch of capital, but if there
Right.
was a product where we needed a bunch of capital and there wasn't a compelling story, I don't think we would do it.
Yeah.
And so we kind of, that's like the quadrant that we wouldn't do. And I think it's just because it's risky for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like if it was like something where it was like a notebook that didn't have a compelling story, but for some reason we needed to make like 10,000 of them on the first one, and so we needed like $40,000, we wouldn't probably just do that, or we wouldn't do that just like on our own without Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But then I don't think we would just launch it at all if we felt like it didn't have a compelling story.
Yeah.
And so it's either like,
that makes sense.
Product. So here's another example. So we started with the glyph, right? Launched it on Kickstarter, and I think we did 3 versions updating it without going on Kickstarter. And then on the 4th one, we went on Kickstarter again because it was completely different. Like it was adjustable in this different way. It had like a hand grip and all this stuff. And so it was like we had done all these like updates to the glyph, and then we had this huge update that required a lot of tooling, so it required a lot of capital, but it was also a good story, and so we went back. And so I think that is like how we make the decision, basically. And again, like there's something that just don't fit,
Yeah, and you could use,
no.
I mean, in theory, we could be using Kickstarter for every single product that we release, even if we don't need the capital. It's a compelling platform to use, but there is something nice about launching something and someone being able to buy it in that moment instead of, waiting 9 months to a year
Yeah.
to receive it. So we try to like balance that out. And I think, as I said before, the idea of like, okay, this is a new thing for us and it's like a big thing. It's like a little more forgiving of like the timetable that Kickstarter allows, because it's like, well, this is a new thing, we have to make this. Whereas if it was like a variation of something we already have, it feels a little better to just be like, bam, here it is. Like you can order it now.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, before I go on, I'm just going to quickly share the results of the poll so everybody can see. People validate demand for my product and raise funds. Capital seem to be like the 2 biggest reasons why I think people here are going to launch products, which is not unexpected. But I want to now drill in a little bit how you guys tackled actually launching and preparing for your launch. But before I start like kind of diving into like the kind of core elements of that, I just wanted to ask you a general question, like what for you do you find is the hardest part of launching a product on Kickstarter? Maybe the part that requires the most work. Like, is there one part that stands out to you as the most challenging?
And what do you think? You do a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes like putting the Kickstarter project page together feels a little bit like what Tom was describing with manufacturing earlier, where it's like, oh, we already did all the fun parts of like thinking about this product and now designing it. It's like, now we have to like gather all these like product photos and graphics and get all the page right. Sometimes that can feel like a little bit like a chore. And the videos we do are fun sometimes, and then also like a lot of work sometimes. So I would just say like the putting together of the project page in general is kind of a 50-50 of this is fun and this is a chore. So that is, I guess, like the hardest part is sometimes you have to get over that hump again of like, okay, this has to actually be done if we want to like launch this. So let's do it. But yeah, up until that point, it's mostly just the fun, like product design part. So I feel like putting the page together is when it like starts to really become real. Like, okay, this is happening.
Yeah.
And I think, oh, go on.
I'm just saying, gotta dot those I's and cross those T's. I mean, I think it's that work that can be a little grueling, and the like the especially if you're making a physical product, the like validating like some of the like details of like cost and like logistics, that stuff is like not fun and is like so important. So I think that is also like a part of it that's just like, oh, I have to get like a quote for this, not a ballpark, and like, you know, that kind of thing.
And have you, before we move on to the next, have you guys ever gotten bitten by that, by under validating that information on any of your projects?
We've gotten lucky because I think we've always just wanted high margins on our products. And so we've never had to cut it close and do all the exact math that when you hear about these like nightmare Kickstarter, like failure products that run out of money, it's because I think they're either some big surprise came up, or more likely they're cutting it so close with their margins that there's no room for any error. And then that's just a huge problem. And so I think because we've always kind of built in these like, you know, 4x margins or more, we've been lucky. The other thing is, we always have been kind of at a similar scale with number of backers. And so if we got a product that had like 200,000 backers or something, I could see things changing. Like it would probably financially, it'd probably be okay, but I think we would learn a lot because it's not the same at all. Totally. And so I think we've been a little bit lucky in the scope that we decide. But we're just, as you can probably tell, we're like really conservative in terms of like that. And we're not running these big marketing campaigns for the campaign that are eating up all of our margins and like kind of cutting it razor thin. I think we just kind of avoid those things.
Yeah. Sorry, just real quick. I think the Cosmonaut is probably the closest we came to kind of going off the rails, where it wasn't so much a money thing as in hindsight, it's pretty wild that we're comfortable launching the campaign with how far along the design journey we were, which was basically just a sheath around an existing stylus. And it's like, as our prototype, and we were like, yeah, we can make this. And it turned out it was much more difficult to actually do the like capacitive tip and the whole thing. That was a real learning experience for us. And there were some dark days where it was like, can we make this? But as Tom mentioned before, like having the 6,000 backers, whether they knew it or not, they were holding us accountable. Like we couldn't back down because we had 6,000 people waiting for us to make this thing. So that is what pushed us to actually do the hard thing and figure out how to make it. Whereas if we were doing that in the dark, I think we would have just given up. We would have said, this is a little too hard for, you know, our company. Let's just like move on to a different idea.
And so one of the things that I know, I think for you two, it differs a lot from a lot of the first time creators that I think we have here in attendance as well, is the notion of community building. You know, I mean, you now having, you know, both launched so many products, but also all the other work you do around your podcast, your newsletters, your blogs. Like you've built an audience over the years that you guys can tap into. I'd love to just start the conversation here by understanding like how important is your audience to the success of your Kickstarter campaign, of your business? Like what's the number of, like what is like out of your backers, like how many of them are repeat backers, for example? Like an estimate, doesn't have to be exact.
I don't know what the percentage, but it's a lot. I mean, I know on our website, like 60% of our customers are like repeat customers. I know for a fact,
Oh, wow.
like our email list is the most important asset we have for our company. Like if that went away, we'd be, hosed. So, it's really, I mean, and we, from the beginning, we've kind of thought about our company as more like a band that makes albums rather than a company. And so having like fans or whatever, or customers that have a relationship with us seems natural. And because of that, we actually don't do the stuff where we like pay for clicks or like pay for customers basically, because it just feels like that's not the kind of customers we want to build. And so that limits us for sure on growth. So we don't do a lot of the kind of like growth hacky, like email list or advertising stuff. And so I think we're also blinded by our own success in terms of that, because we started off like getting launched into the atmosphere. And so we don't, I know that it is different. Like we sit in this position of privilege in terms of that. And I don't know that we're even have any good advice about how to start that beyond, I think, the things that I've kind of already shared. Like if I was starting out, I would make a small campaign on purpose of like 100 people. If I could get 100 backers, that'd be awesome, because it's just a way to like make this amazing relationship with those 100 people. And then it can grow from there. Like I know that the way we grow is like word of mouth. And when people like tweet about us, they tweet about us not from like, hey, look at this cool product, that's it. It's like, they talk about us like they have somewhat of a relationship with us. And so to me, that's like how we do it. And I think that's how I would approach it starting again, is like a real, like try to build these like really long-term relationships with customers rather than ones that will just go in and out of like an email funnel or whatever.
Yeah. Basically, the only way we grow our email list is through Kickstarter. So like we don't do the whole like banner thing that pops up, hey, 10% off if you sign up for our email on our website, which is like the most horrible thing. And so when we have a Kickstarter campaign, these are people that are like really, our fans are really like interested in what we're doing. They're willing to back a Kickstarter. And so when we send the survey to gather their address and their order and such, we have a question, a checkbox in very clear language that's like, do you want to sign up for our email list? Here's what we use it for. We send like 3 emails a year whenever we like launch a new product, and the sign up rate is
80%,
like really, really high. And it makes perfect sense. It's like, oh yeah, of course, these people are interested in us. Like we've been clear about what this is they're signing up for. And that is basically, I feel like that is the only way we grow our list, but it like works really well. It's like every time we have a Kickstarter, it's like we get this like burst of people like added to our list, and we keep doing Kickstarters and we keep adding people. And it's like, it seems like to be working. And that perhaps goes back to your question of like, why do you keep coming back to Kickstarter? It's like that has turned out to be a pretty good like audience building tool for us.
Right. Yeah. And so I would love to ask you guys more questions, but I do, and I have a bunch more on my list, but I want to make sure we have time for the audience. And I think a lot of them will ask Kickstarter related stuff. So let's switch gears. So everyone, I'm going to ask everyone now to go into the Q&A list. I know there's a bunch of questions that have already been dropped in there. I just want to make sure that everyone is upvoting them. I don't think there's been much upvoting so far, so I'm just going to go by the first one that was submitted. That's where we'll start. And then as the other ones get upvoted, we'll use that as our guide. So the first one comes from Damien, who's one of our members. I know you guys are focused on selling D2C with your website, and I'm curious about your motivation behind that and why you haven't pushed to get your products into more retailers. Do you see any value in expanding your customer base by selling in small local design or gift shops?
Yeah, so we've, especially in the beginning, we like thought about that a lot more. And I think it's a mixed bag for sure. I think for one, we make pretty niche products. So like getting into Target and Best Buy and stuff never made sense. Or even like Crate and Barrel or something wouldn't make sense when we were doing cocktail stuff. But then it takes a lot of work to manage those wholesale relationships, especially if you're on the outbound side. Like if you're trying to like find those retailers and then like convince them and send them sell sheets and all this stuff. And so we do some wholesale things, but it's basically if they come to us, we have like a little wholesale section of our Shopify site, and they just like buy them and we send it to them. And so it's pretty easy, and we have like a little sheet of discounts and stuff. So we do wholesale, but we've never been aggressive about like finding the retailers and then managing those relationships. And I think it's a lot because we're just a 2-person team, and that is like a full-time job, I think. But also, you know, our margins are good, but it starts to feel like the margins really aren't good when you have a wholesaler or retailer asking for like 50% off or 60% off. And so it's like for us, it's more important to us to put energy into developing that relationship with our customers so they can become repeat customers than putting this energy into finding like wholesale or retail customers where the margins aren't nearly as good. However, I will say we do sell on Amazon, which is like weird because it's like the worst relationship in terms of the customer's relationship to us because it's so anonymous. But we do fulfilled by Amazon because for some of our products, it's like so easy to do the fulfilled by Amazon, and they actually sell really well ongoing, that we kind of think about Amazon FBA as like a mini wholesale customer in terms of they don't usually take as much percentage. Usually it's like 25 to 28% of like of what they take off the top. And it's just really easy. We just send them stuff when we want, and then it's in the warehouse and they manage the returns and the customer relationships and everything. So for some of our products, and it's only a couple of the things like the more tech related products we have on Amazon. But otherwise, I think it's just if we had some magic thing where someone came to us and they're like, hey, we'll manage all the relationships of all these retailers and literally do everything, and there's no risk to you, and they don't take much margin, we would totally, like, we're not opposed to it, but that doesn't exist. Like, you know, that's that thing. We've talked to people who do like the buyer agent thing where they like, you know, they do all that for you, but they take a lot off the top and they don't understand your product. And it's just a distraction basically in our minds a lot of times.
Awesome. I'm going to jump to the next one. So this is from Roger. What do you think about hybrid launching, meaning launching related or complementary products within a campaign, both through crowdfunding and direct online retail or Amazon? So Roger, I assume you're asking here about launching your like related projects. So it's not that you're launching the same thing, I assume, on both, because, and I'll just take part of this just because on Kickstarter, you can't launch a product on Kickstarter that's selling directly on. So I suspect you're just saying selling a related product. Have you guys ever considered doing anything like that?
We've definitely like we considered, like, if let's say we're like launching a notebook, we would maybe have like another product, like a pin or something, is like one of the reward tiers as like an extra or like a companion or something. Like we tried when we launched this custom pin, we considered doing like a notebook with it or something. And that could make sense, especially when you have a kind of like, you know, these like categories of products that make sense. But what we decided that what we do is we use a backer kit. Like after the Kickstarter thing is over, we use backer kits, which, you know, helps manage like all the backers, but then there's also like a store attached to it. And we get like a lot of people tacking on products that we already, you know, have to their like Kickstarter, like order backer. And that works really well. So we don't really, that's just what we do from now on. We don't like tie it in the campaign, because basically we just want the campaign to be as like simple as possible without a lot of extra tiers and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we use mechanisms that way, kind of on the back end, like upselling, I guess, like our current backers, rather than like trying to fold that into the Kickstarter story, like as it's launched.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Cool. Going on to the next one from Caitlin Whitman. How do you know which ideas you want to pursue and launch? Do you just think about the coolness factor versus thinking about how many other people want it too? Yeah. So is it just about your passion for it, or is it also more of an opportunity assessment of what you think has more of a market opportunity?
Yeah, it's definitely both. I mean, yeah, and it's all just like gut. There's no really like market research or anything like that. But I think the things we get most excited about are the ideas that hit on both of those, where it's like, ooh, I really want this thing, and I think a lot of people will also. And then that's when I think that's what gets us the most excited.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, going on to Alex's question. How do you manage your SKUs?
It's horrible.
How many SKUs do you guys have actually?
Boy, it's
How many do
horrible.
you guys have?
I can just count them real quick. Because we have a little piece of software. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, it's a nightmare is the answer.
We have 22 currently, and we have a couple like discontinued ones. But the problem is we have 2 warehouses and Amazon. So it becomes a complete and utter nightmare. And there was a time when we were like gonna do like, we'll do like 3 colors for a glyph. It'll be CMYK and it'll be really designy and funny and cool. But then we just started thinking about like what that would do for inventory management. And it's like, oh no. And so we are incredibly careful about how many SKUs we release and like colorways and combinations, because keeping your stuff in stock is literally the hardest thing we do. Especially because like when we're ordering parts from different suppliers and then combining them and then getting to the warehouse, and it's just a complete nightmare. And we've actually had to roll our own little like internal inventory dashboard tools because we have products across different things and we want it all together in the way we want to see it. So that is unfortunately a very difficult thing. And the only I think lesson there is just like be really conservative and start slow if you're making a physical thing with like the number of SKUs you offer, because it's just
and that seems like a common thing. Like we've talked to first time project creators and stuff, and it's always like, yeah, we're gonna do this and it's gonna be in these colors, and we're just like, no colors just make one of them to start off.
One,
and then
please, just one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So moving on to the next one. When it comes to electronics, what are the main experiences to set up things for manufacturing precisely in China? Do you guys have, I know we didn't get to the one Kickstarter campaign that you guys did that didn't fund, which was I think, do you guys have any other products that you released with electronics?
We have some like Qi charger things and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
And we have like, we've in developing some of those, and I have some experience with this, but we don't have a ton. The only thing I would say is there's a ton of resources out there for prototyping those things and then getting them made. And one of the things that we did is we were considering making this like custom circuit that would interact with this like Qi charger. And I actually went on Fiverr to find an electrical engineer to do the circuit design. And I can do some circuit design, but I know I needed more expertise. And it actually worked out super well. So I think although electronics are like really scary in some ways, there's this super, super robust development prototyping pipeline that exists because of like basically consumer product like startups. And so there's a lot of ways to actually get there with that stuff and a lot of infrastructure, like way more than injection molding, I would say. Like it's way easier in some ways to take an idea from like prototyping to production in the world of electronics than it is for like injection molding, like by far. So
oh wow.
Yeah.
That is surprising to me.
Yeah, it's just because everything is like standardized. Yeah, and there's all these like mechanisms for doing it, and so there's like standardized file formats and all this stuff. So that
awesome. Cool. Let's jump. We have time for just a couple more. So Alex, again, what do you know? What do you know now that new starters should know?
One thing we didn't touch on, and sorry, Dan, if I'm
No, go
hogging
for it.
here, but
Yeah.
like I admit, the logistics, the shipping and the logistics is the hardest part in some ways. And so that's something to not skip planning for when you're doing a Kickstarter project. So,
Mhm.
it's pretty easy to get shipping rates, like figure out what shipping rates are like internationally and what they are in the US. But just like that whole thing of like just sending stuff, honestly, you'll be surprised if you order like boxes or packaging or parts, like how much space it takes up. It's kind of shocking. And
Mhm.
so just really thinking about just like, okay, if you're making a physical product, like what is this stuff going to be? Like, what is it? How is it going to be packaged? Like you need to know how it's going to be packaged before you launch a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Like the shipping box, like what
Yeah.
it is. Because there's weird caveats. Like for instance, on our notebooks, like the Pano book is just over a pound. And so that makes it like 3 times as expensive to ship than if it would be just under a pound. And so we like we almost with one of our tote book products or the next notebook, we made it a 2-pack instead of a 3-pack so that it could be under a pound. So it'd be way easier to ship. And so knowing like what your finished shipping box is, you should know that before you launch Kickstarter and know what the shipping rates are, because that's the easy way to get totally bit really hard, really hard.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a place where I've heard many horror stories about that. So, all right, cool. So let's go. We have here one from Patrick. Your rewards a bit different, where you only have 1 or 2 pledge tiers compared to multiple layers of super early birds. So I think he's essentially getting to like how simplifying down your rewards without offering all those different levels of early birds and so forth hurt your conversion or help. I mean, have you guys even ever tried or considered doing that type of thing?
Yeah, so I have no
something?
idea. I have no idea if it hurts our conversions because we've never really tried to do a comparison or anything like that. I just like philosophically am pretty opposed to like shenanigans. Like I always want to keep things just as straightforward. Like early on in our like company, it was like simplicity in product design, in the Kickstarter page layout, and how our company is designed. It's like that's what it was. And I think along the history of our company, we've added like clarity. It's like simplicity and clarity. It's just like, how can we make this as easy to understand and as easy to buy or back or whatever? And so my personal philosophy is I think some of that stuff can get in the way or can be confusing, or you have a paradox of choice or whatever. So it's like, let's make this like the Steve Jobs thing, just like a cool glass of water, that is just goes down very easy. And so we we have an idea in our head of what the retail price would be. And typically the Kickstarter price will be a little bit lower than that. And we do call that out in the tier, which we think is like a pretty good middle ground of like being enticing. It's like, hey, we know this is going to take like a year to make, but if you buy it now, like you're getting a little bit of a discount. We think that's fine. That's appropriate. But having all these like segmented tiers of like the super early bird and now it's just early bird, I don't think that's necessary. I think it's just confusing or just adds clutter. It's like, just get to the point. Like, here's the thing. Do you want it? Yes or no?
I think we're also somewhat allergic to like hard selling people.
Mhm.
When we used to go to trade shows, people would come up and they'd be like, okay, sell me on it. And we would just like simply describe what it does. And if it wasn't for them, it's like, I don't want you to buy it if it's not for you, because then you don't like the product and then you don't like us. And so we don't do the like hard sell advertising stuff because it just makes a bad customer experience. And then that just reflects poorly on us. And so in general, that's kind of like our attitude. And so I think we always stay away from that stuff, probably to our detriment, honestly, in terms of money. But I think in terms of like long-term relationship with customers, I think it like helps to just be like, not so hard sell. Yeah.
No, that's great. And I do think, there are some creators, and I think including like Peak Design, I think they have a very similar perspective to you guys, where I think they tried it in one campaign only, and they don't really offer that type of thing. And which is, I'm not trying to say at all, I think for some campaigns it makes sense, Some
Yeah.
creators use that strategy and it can work really well for them, but I think it's a you know, I respect your guys' decision and like desire to keep it simple and really focus on the backer experience. I mean, that's actually one of the things that I've been a big fan. I'm going to take one last question for you guys to answer quickly, and then we'll do the wrap up. And that's Jenny's question here, where she just asked, how much of your sales come from initial Kickstarter pledges and how much from post campaign sales? Like,
yeah, so we have a big spike when we launch a Kickstarter. If you just look at total revenue, huge spike. And then we usually kind of order, like, let's say there's 1,000 backers and we need to get 1,000 pins. We usually will order 2,000 at the very beginning, like double is kind of what we normally do. And then we just kind of have a long tail for a long time in a product. And we've started slowly discontinuing some products, but like the Cosmonaut we've had for now like 10 years, basically. And it's just like a little like long tail product that kind of sits there and just kind of consistently sells. And so we definitely have a spike, but I think if you were to look at the lifetime of a product, the Kickstarter is probably like maybe 10% of the total sales, or maybe 5, or I don't know. But it's definitely a huge spike. But then we use that to pay for a lot of inventory that we sell. And then like every 6 months or a year, we'll like restock them, or like we'll reorder parts or whatever.
awesome. That's great. And so with that, I'm just gonna, let me quickly just turn on the slides here for a few wrap up items. I just want to ask everyone, you know, if you enjoyed this event today, you know, check out our past events at golaunchstudio.com/YouTube. Send feedback to me. I'm always looking for what kind of thing are you looking to hear? Like what topics do you want to hear from? What creators do you want to hear from? And you know, what ways that we can we improve the format of the events that we do? Of course, I want to, you know, send a huge thank you to our guests, Tom and Dan. You know, we really appreciate your time, all the wisdom that you shared. Everyone should go and check out studioneat.com, where you can, you know, look at all their products that they sell. You can check out their podcast, their Gazette weekly newsletter, which is really awesome, where you just get to you know, hear from Tom and Dan every week about like things that they're excited about, and they give some nice little updates about the work that Studio Neat is doing. And of course, you know, I just want to thank all of you for joining. You know, it's what I would just say is you know, we really do appreciate the time and that you spend with us. If you have any further questions about Launch Studio or whatnot, hang out. I'll hang out for a little bit. But I think Dan and Tom, again, thank you both so much for sharing all your wisdom with everyone here today.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, that wisdom. Thanks for having us.
All right, awesome. Well, everyone else, you know, again, I'll hang out here if you want to have a few questions. We're just going to give about a minute or so for everybody to sort themselves out. All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Cool. So now, you know, for the rest of the event, I'm going to switch. You know, if anyone has questions about, you know, Launch Studio, or they have other questions that, you know, I'm going to be able to hang out here for another 15 minutes. I'm going to switch though from the Q&A panel to the chat. So as we continue on here, you know, if you want to share any comments, anything, please go through the chat. I mean, the one thing that before we get to questions, I'd love in the chat to hear, you know, any feedback that you have of the event. Were you able to learn anything? Was there anything specifically that you found was especially helpful for you? Yeah, I would love it to hear from some of the people who are still around, you know, what are their thoughts on how the event went? Don't be shy. I see Jeremy said, thank you, fantastic. Ali, would you recommend should be the time from a backer who buys the product to actual delivery date? Ali, I think that really depends, you know, like on the complexity of your product, and I don't think there is a right time. I think, you know, I would say, you know, more than 18 months is probably too long. You know, I think ideally you want to be planning to deliver that reward within 12 months or so. But at the same time, you know, I think more than anything, it's important that you have a realistic time frame, because it's better to say it's going to take you 12 months and deliver it in 12 months than to say it's going to take 6 months and deliver it in 12 months or 18 months. So but so there are projects that deliver within a few months, there are projects that deliver within 18 months, or I think again it varies so much depending on the complexity and all about the product. So yes, yeah, 3 to 6 months is good, but again, just promise 3 to 6 months only if you can actually deliver it between 3 to 6 months. Awesome. All right, does anyone else have any other questions, comments they want to drop? If there's nothing else, I'm going to give it another 30 seconds or so. If I don't hear anything from anyone else, then we'll wrap up. Thanks, Ali, for the kind words. Yeah, I hope to see you at the next one. Actually, I can actually share. The next event's going to happen on the 17th of August, and we're going to have Heather Carprin from Kickstarter. She's one of the leads in the design and tech outreach team, and she's going to join us to talk about pretty much like how do you get featured on Kickstarter, what kind of projects get the Kickstarter team excited, and also just answer a bunch of questions from our audience. So mark your calendar for that. Again, it's going to be August 17th, Tuesday, same time, noon. She'll be joining us. And Patrick, when will the Launch Studio course go live again? We're going to open registrations again in August. Feel free to reach out to me at julio@launchstudio.com, and I can give you more information about the upcoming launch. Oh, awesome! Yeah, I will definitely bring Stayway and Taylor into one of our events. We actually had Taylor join I think our very first panel, which was in December of last year, and I also really big fan of their work, and I'm going to put them on our list for future guests, especially for the Creator and Launch Studio series. Yeah, Patrick, thank you for attending, and thanks for your questions and your comments and participation. All right, cool. I think it seems like things are dying down. So with that, I am going to wrap up the event. I will just start by thanking all of you who have joined us, and I'm wishing you all a great day. Okay.